I'm Chris Conrad. 15 years ago, I wrote a book called Hemp, Lifeline to the Future that talked about how we could keep our economy growing, save the environment, and create more social justice by people using cannabis hemp instead of timber, fossil fuels, cotton, and other environmentally dangerous and devastating kinds of crops to make the basic needs of society: food, clothing, housing, paper, plastic, and energy, by means of fuel, of course. And so I've had the real pleasure of watching the hemp industry grow in the years since I wrote the book. And I've seen people learn some very valuable things, produce amazing products, and make some very fundamental mistakes. And I would say that one of the most common mistakes with people is thinking that if they make a hemp product, that's all it takes. Or if they make one of every hemp product that they can think of, that that's what it's going to take. And the answer is no. The economy is such that you need to have a business plan, you need to have a marketing strategy, you need to have a product that's economic to produce and that will create profit when you sell it. And so that's been one of the basic problems at Apollo.
Yeah, but don't you need to have a vision first?
And have a vision. And so, with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists here one by one and get a first conversation. I guess we can each have about 3 minutes or 5 minutes or maximum to talk about what each of them is doing, and then create a dialogue by bringing up questions from you. I would like to make one other comment though. On the last panel, they said that newspapers are dead. I'm the publisher of the West Coast Leaf, and I assure you we're doing quite well, and ask you to go ahead and come online and read our paper and subscribe, etc. Now, with that, let me introduce to my left from your perspective, or my right from my perspective, George Rohrbacher, who is a rancher and a former state senator and a hemp advocate from, wow, it's a lot louder. Hemp advocate from Oregon, who's going to go ahead and fill you in on some of his great work on behalf of Normal and Hemp. George? Oh. Big hand, everybody. George Rohrbacher.
Well, thank you very much. And one of the messages that the last panel was dealing with, and in fact every panel that's been up here is dealing with, is how do we communicate to the larger society about who we are, what we are. And one of the very first things that we have to think about is that hemp and marijuana in virtually all its forms is not as deviant. It's not deviant at all from our perspective. And one of the things that I keep talking to my fellow members of the Normal Board about is we need to continually tie this back to dominant culture. One of the things that you'll see in the Hempfest brochure this year on, I don't know, page 8 or 10 is a one-page ad ripping off American Gothic, the most iconic and most parodied image in American culture, to get across the message that this October America arrests its 20 millionth American on marijuana charges. And those statistics only go from the Uniform Crime Reporting Act of 1965 to today. This thing actually started in the 30s, or depending on the locale, even earlier than that. But the idea is to tie this through the image of American Gothic, which we now call marijuana Gothic, to tie this back to the dominant culture. In America, all of us who are interested in hemp and marijuana have heard about the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence being on hemp paper, Washington and President Jefferson actually growing hemp on their farms. That's an example of that. And I've been doing some reading in history and found another one of our founding fathers. Now I believe we have 3 out of the 4 on Mount Rushmore. Abraham Lincoln. I wrote a blog about this on the Normal website, and I'll sort of abbreviate the best parts of that blog for this. When Abraham Lincoln, the great emancipator, was first strode onto the public stage in 1832, that man was wearing a pair of hemp pants. And from many points of view, Abraham Lincoln was our greatest president because he had to deal with the issue of slavery. Everyone else from Washington to Lincoln had put slavery off to the side. It was too injurious, too divisive to deal with. But Abe Lincoln came up through essentially the pain, the expansion, and the death on the American frontier. And he and his family were one of the poorest of the poor. Well, back then, what the poorest of the poor wore was something in the 17 and 1800s they called toe cloth or toe linen, which is the same as tow rope. It's something woven out of hemp fibers. And I read a biography of Lincoln by Carl Sandburg, the great poet, who also grew up in Illinois, who served in the same unit of the Army that Lincoln served in, who talked to people that actually had Lincoln for dinner and overnight. And his book, his 6-volume biography of Lincoln, which runs like 2,800 pages, published, he got a Pulitzer Prize for it in 1939, but it's full of references to hemp. And let me just read you one of them. If I find the right one. Oh yeah, this is Lincoln. Here we go. This is Lincoln after he'd just been defeated for his first time running for legislature, and he started studying law. And this is a quote from his cousin. At one time, while storekeeping, Abe slept on the counter of a store because the Rutledge Tavern was overcrowded. He wore flax and tow linen pantaloons, no vest, a coat, and one suspender. The idea of America's greatest president campaigning for public office, going to law school in a pair of hemp pants is something America doesn't know about. You know, the people in this room are probably some of the first people, other than Carl Sandburg, who wrote this in the 30s, simply because the people have been trying to defeat pot culture, defeat hemp as an industrial project, have tried to demonize the entire thing. And the reason that the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence were made out of hemp paper is because the vast majority of people at that time were exceptionally poor. That's what the slaves wore. The biography of the guy Joshua, what's his name? Joshua Henson, who is the one that Uncle Tom's Cabin is built on. In his autobiography, he describes how slaves were clothed. Every Christmas, all the children got a brand new shirt. Every Christmas, all the men and women got a shirt and a pair of pantaloons, and they were all woven out of tow cloth, just like tow ropes, woven out of hemp. And at the Revolutionary War, since most people in America were poor, that's where the paper came from, and that's where our institutional documents, the Declaration and the Constitution, that's why they're on hemp paper, because the slaves and poor people like Lincoln, those are the ones who had hemp on their back. And that's where we came from, and we should be damn proud of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George, for that great introduction.